Let's examine another very important deposit and identify both the deposit and the withdrawal. The deposit I would call clarifying expectations. The withdrawal would be having ambiguous expectations or violating expectations. In fact, you will find that the root cause of almost all breakdowns in family life, in organizational work, comes from ambiguous, confusing, or violated expectations. Think about that. You see, here's one of the problems. If the expectations are ambiguous, both parties are acting in good faith based on their own hope and expectation. Then as they act upon that, and they find the other is not fulfilling the expectation, they begin to feel a violation coming in. And if they don't resolve this, come to grips with it, communicate and clarify it, then what happens is it worsens, and you get into a negative cycle that feeds upon itself. Sometimes this is called collusion. And as you move from an ambiguous expectation to a violated expectation, now you're moving into major forms of withdrawal from the emotional bank account. And this exactly explains how relationships can be beautiful at the beginning and deteriorate fairly rapidly into one of toleration, into one of fighting and flighting, cold wars, hot wars. And you know what form of expectations become most important? It's how you define roles and goals. That's where you want to make clear what the expectations are. Who has what responsibility, what role, and what are the important goals that we're working on? You know, you've heard people talk like this. I thought that was the important. That's not the real goal. The goal is, I can't believe you're doing that. I thought that was my role. You did? I've been doing that all the time, and you thought, I can't believe. The problem is most people don't even talk openly with each other, and they just work on the assumption that the other people are violating their expectations. Then the relationship deteriorates. That's why it is so important that you are very clear up front in defining roles and goals so that you have correct mutual understanding and expectation. Who has this particular role? Who has this role? What goals are we working together on? Sometimes it's helpful to even write all this down so that the expectations are very clear, very understandable, not ambiguous at all. And then to set up times where people review how things are going before they deteriorate, so that corrections can be made, so that correct expectations can be reestablished, and you don't get into the accusatory attitude which inevitably follows the feeling of having expectations that have been violated. I'll tell you another extremely important and powerful deposit. I call it being loyal to the absent. That means talking about people when they are absent in a way that you would talk about them as if they were present. The opposite of this is to badmouth, to get into different forms of duplicity and disloyalty. Maybe you've heard the expression, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. In other words, when you're trying to walk east and west at the same time, every part of your life will reflect that double-mindedness, such as saying one thing to a person's face and another thing about them to their back. Now, what are we loyal to? Well, we are loyal to principles, first and foremost. And the most central principle is that we are loyal to people who are not present. Now, let's put these things together. Let's say that the two of us sit and talk about, let's say, your husband's mistakes and weaknesses. And you and I are friends. We see each other in some kind of carpool or at work or whatever, and we sit and talk this way. How would your husband feel about that? And how would you feel about it if your husband did this? And furthermore, how might you be talking about me if you and I had a strain in our relationship? Again, you see, if you want to retain those who are present, always be loyal to those who are absent. In other words, be loyal to correct principles about those people. The principle being, talk about them as if they were present. You might even be critical. But the nature of your criticism is responsible and constructive. This causes you to moderate your spirit, to cultivate humility. It affects your tone, your voice, and how much more responsible and careful you are. This is a tough duty deposit because many people get their psychological jollies in talking about other people's weaknesses and confessing their sins. And it seems to unite them with people who agree with them. But in the last analysis, it's a very bad foundation. To use the construction expression, it's bad mud. The brick is made of bad mud. All you have to do is stress it, and it itself will break. It's a tremendous assumption to work upon. Always assume that what you're saying about another, they can overhear. I was violating this deposit one time myself when I was complaining to a university president, where I was a visiting professor, about his housing director who'd given us a very bad housing situation, which was contrary to our agreement and the expectation. And I was really cutting into this guy and his competency, and the president said to me, "Stephen, I'm so sorry to hear about this housing situation you're in. You know, the housing director is such a fine, competent person. Why don't we just have him come on over here and we'll solve the problem together?" Oh, boy, I said inside myself, I don't want to be involved. I really don't want to talk to him. I just want to talk about him. The president was matter-of-fact to me and very pleasant as he invited the gentleman to come on over to his office to talk about this. But I'll tell you, when I was thinking about it as he was walking across campus, I said to myself, oh, what have I got myself into? Anyway, by the time he arrived at the president's office, I was very humbled and filled with a kind of duplicity. How are you? Nice to see you. The president could see this duplicity. I mean, 10 minutes before I was calling him an incompetent. He never carries through with his commitment. And there I was saying, how are you? You see, a double-minded person is unstable in all his ways, and I was double-minded. It taught me a very powerful lesson that I never forgot, and my respect for that president went up tenfold. Always be loyal to the absent.